Right. I love this mechanical voice here. All right. So yeah, how about to start? We have 1 hour here. My name is Kasia. I'm the Berlin Zebras Unite chapter lead. I also work for Mozilla here in Berlin, and I'm a big believer in the fact that we can actually start a revolution, like a systemic change in how we do business. I think it's high time to do this. I think also the recent crisis makes it more evident that we need companies to start thinking in a more sustainable way, more ethical way, how we treat people, and how we think about business and who benefits from it, and how we impact our societies. So at Zebras Unite, I assume that you're familiar with the movement, but just to summarize, it was a movement started a couple of years ago by 4 women in the US who had companies, and they struggled with getting venture capital funding, and they just found that they don't fit this model, that there's a one pathway forward, and to getting funding for a startup, you need to grow, so that you can give the investors a chance for a very high return on investment. And very often on the way, the mission or any ideas that the founder had in the beginning get that prioritized. And they just found that is not right in terms of diversity. Also, there is not much diversity in the org. It's mostly people who get funding are men, mostly they're white. And I thought, okay, it's high time we need to put something out there. I put out a manifesto. I called the Zebras Fix What Unicorns Breaks, and felt like, okay, we need the change here. Who's with us, so to say? And they got an overwhelming reaction to their call, because there was a lot of this kind of experiences, a lot of this kind of thinking around the world, and that's how they started building the movement. That was a couple of years ago, and that resonated so much that people around the world started chapters, including myself. I thought that we need something like this here in Berlin, and but I think October, November last year, we started meeting here with a very small group. In the beginning, we were just 10 people. Evgeny was the first one from New Mittelstand who's here, and we kind of we're allies now. We do this meetups together, and the community started growing. And we see each other somewhere in the niche in between a social entrepreneurship and the traditional startup. And we've been doing these meetups now every month or every 2 months. There's a newsletter, there's a website now, a very humble website. You can find more information on zebras.berlin, very cool URL I secured. And right now we're also talking to the headquarters of Zebras Unite, so to say, to the founders about formalizing the relation a little bit. There will be more centralized, common infrastructure. So it will be much easier for us to plug into the international movement and to exchange funds with chapters from around the world. And today we've been talking about impact investing, about how is it so difficult, how does this look like in Germany. We talk about accelerators, we talk about culture, about values, and this time I'm delighted to have Naomi Ryland here with us, who together with Lisa Jaspers wrote a book called Starting a Revolution, and the book is a revolution and a revelation. I loved it, I ordered it, and I was just I was really mesmerized by how down to earth it is, how packed with advice, how inspirational, and it's also how much based on their personal experience and experience of the amazing women, female leaders that they interviewed. But I will not steal the thunder from Naomi. I will let her talk to you about the book a little bit more herself. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you to get into this Google Doc that I put in the chat and just put your name there, and maybe a book recommendation also if you brought one here, so that we can finish this meetup also inspire oh, there's so many more books that are worth reading. Also, I wanted to give you a stage also for the community before we start. If there's someone here who would like to share something they're doing, or like an initiative, or there's like an open call for applications that others might benefit from, now is your time. We have 5 minutes to share that. And I know that Julia has something to share, and Ari, if he's here, also want to say something about Uplift. So we can start with Julia and then just like raise your hand by emoji.
Yes, so thanks very much, Kasia. I'm also very happy to be here. It's my first time, and I already see some familiar faces. So Naomi, wonderful to see you. And I'm also super enthusiastic to see Christine, who actually also put me in touch with the zebras. So very briefly, because we don't have that much time. So I'm the founder and CEO of the Futures Project. This is a nonprofit initiative that I founded last year here in Berlin. We're mainly focusing on thinking about the future and then actually putting in place the innovations and technologies that get us there. So it's a think tank and a do tank. It's really bringing together reflection and action. It's a very global initiative. So we have really partners, advisors, etc. from all over the world. And right now we are in the middle of our current global call to action for innovators for the future. This is the call that I would like to share with you. I will also put our website, of course, in the chat so that you can all go there and look for more information. And so what we're looking for are innovation projects, innovation in a broad sense, that really aim to improve the life of communities in a sustainable, impactful manner right now, but also with a vision towards the future. At the very end of a long and wonderful selection procedure that is going to last until the autumn, we will enroll the selected projects into a social impact accelerator. So I will stop here, but I would love for you to get in touch if you're interested to share the word in your communities. And yes, as I said, I'll put this in the chat. So please share this and encourage your network to apply. Thanks.
You can add it to Google Doc as well. Thank you, Julia. Okay, anyone else? I see Clemens went to say something. Go ahead. No? Oh, no, okay, you're just clapping.
Yes, exactly. Maybe just one comment from my side, Kasia. Thanks again for hosting as usual. Not sure, is it okay if I share some news from the Mittelstand side? Actually, we had a very great event with Nadine from WHO, also about the question how to build a good company, and we put a recording also, it was an English panel with Tomorrow's Bank co-founder Jakob, who is also a great zebra, and he actually uses zebra term very, very much in their marketing and communication, and I think it's kind of really, he discovered it himself, and he is very good representative of this class of companies and also successful founders. So it's probably quite interesting, and it's on our insights right now. And also just wanted to announce some really good news also, that we will be releasing some German white papers. So actually we're working on something that was kind of outstanding for quite some time, to get a bit more condensed, detailed ideas how Mittelstand is different from other companies, and how it's similar to zebras, and how you can get this bridge and understand why we actually are all in this kind of movement. So yeah, so much looking forward. You can already sign up, and in a few days there will be first white paper appearing. Well, actually it's going to be green paper because it's going to be green. Yeah, in any case. So a green white paper will be appearing very soon. Yeah, okay. Thanks for this.
I share it in all the channels. Okay, all right. And just before, as promised, before Naomi starts talking,
I think also wanted to share something. Sorry, did you?
Yeah. Go ahead, Annika.
Yes. Just for those who are familiar with the works of Donella Meadows, which I think a few of you might be, there's a webinar next week, June 30th, around the same time, a free 90-minute session on collaborative innovation based on the works of Donella Meadows. So I think some people here might find that really interesting. That's all.
Great, thank you. I just added that link as well to the Google Doc. Claps here and there. Okay, and then we promised also that there will be a book lottery here for everybody who registered. There's a chance to win the book. Naomi is holding the book up. It's signed by her and her co-author, who couldn't join us sadly today, but she's here in spirit. And I printed all of your names here. This is my muesli bowl, and I'm just gonna draw now a name, and we're gonna draw as long as till there is someone who's actually participating in the meetup here. Okay, first name, Daniela Bessen. Is Daniela here? No, she missed her chance. All right. Kim Gerlach.
I will let her know.
Yeah. Okay, Kim Gerlach, she's here.
Oh, I do already have the book, but it's a great opportunity to pass it on to someone that has to definitely read it as well.
That's true. Okay, perfect. Okay, so later on you can just send your address to the zebrasunitberlin@gmail.com email. It's there at the bottom of the book, of the Google Doc, and we'll make sure that the book finds its way to you. All right, congratulations. Like, just like if you want to verify, that's the name. All right, okay, without further ado, stage belongs to you, Naomi. Tell us about the book, and then we open the floor for questions and for discussion.
Thank you so much, Kasia. That was a really beautiful introduction, and a big thank you and applause to you as well for doing all of this work voluntarily. So it's very, very impressive and inspirational. Okay, so first of all, I have to apologize that Lisa's not with me. She was part of the bill, so we advertised her, but we can't deliver on her. She's got childcare conflicts, so she's got a baby and a toddler, and she was like, I can try and still do it because she's that kind of person. I was like, no. So it will just be me, but I will try my best to speak on behalf of both of us and also tell her story a little bit as well. I don't want to spend too much time kind of like talking about the book, because I know that some people have read it already, but since some people probably haven't, and just to kind of set the scene, I thought I'd just do a little mini presentation to give a bit of background also on our stories. And then I'm really interested to just get into discussion and see what you all kind of think about the revolution and how we can get it going. So I will just try and share the screen now. Do you see that? Is it as a full screen? Okay, awesome. That's the book. Yeah, Lisa and I published this book in October last year. We crowdfunded it at the beginning of last year. And we were obviously working on it and thinking about it for a while. And the kind of pivotal moment when we decided to go for it, we actually described at the beginning of the book. And that was a moment when Lisa and I were both kind of sitting on the sofa feeling a bit desperate and sorry for ourselves, because we were finding the whole founding a company thing kind of miserable. And one of the reasons, or one of the kind of like reasons that I talk about as to why I was really motivated to share my experience and to write the book is very related to the whole Zebras thing. So we didn't know about it until we started researching the book, but I'd had the exact same experience as the Zebra founders had as well when trying to find my company. And we got caught between not really being impact driven enough for impact investing and not really being profit driven enough for doing the VC investing, but we were sort of stuck with those options. And so although we kind of primarily wanted impact investors, we tried to find VCs as well, because we thought that's kind of what you had to do, and that was sort of all the options that we had open to us. And it was 9 months of pretty much pure hell, even though we wanted to raise a quite small amount, you know, compared to all of these big stories that you read about in the Gründerzene and all the venture magazines. We only actually needed around 500,000, but it took us 9 months of real slog to get it. In fact, we didn't get the full 500, we got 300,000, and in the end we got it from impact investors. And we just felt like the whole experience of looking for investors just absolutely didn't match our values and the way in which we wanted to work, and yeah, it just made us kind of like doubt the whole thing. So, you know, I was getting advice like, you know, don't show any kind of emotions, don't show any kind of doubt when you're talking to investors. Just lie to the investors and tell them that you've already got interest from other investors. Make sure you push, you know, your figures up as much as possible. you know, make sure you've got a hockey stick, regardless of whether you think you're going to make that much money or not. Even advice like, you know, make sure you speak deeper and stand up like this, and like, you know, make your presence felt physically. And I was just like, really? Okay, this is what you have to do? Sure, I'll try. And kind of went along with it, and just, yeah, kind of like learned really. We're kind of often either just not really taken very seriously, or were called arrogant. We had the feeling that we were often, as women, just kind of like invited to pitch events anyway because they needed to put up the numbers. We were usually the only women in pitch events for, you know, 10 other guys or something. And the whole experience, you know, was pretty miserable. They'd make us wait for months without responding. And by the end of it, I was just like, I am never going to do this again. Like, first of all, why did nobody ever tell me it was like this before? Because in retrospect, then you talk to people and you realize that it is kind of like that for everybody. And second of all, you know, why on earth do we put ourselves through this? It's, you know, massively damaging for our mental health. And on top of all of that, the kind of whole structures and systems behind it, in terms of the, you know, growth at all costs mentality, are not doing our society any good. Lisa, on the other hand, didn't look for investment, so she bootstrapped, so she didn't have that sort of issue to deal with. But for her, it was very much this situation of having felt like when she'd been working, she'd had to pretend that she was somebody else. She'd had to kind of leave her home self at home when she went to work and kind of put on this mask and, you know, not be emotional, not necessarily say what she was thinking, just kind of like go with the flow. Like, you know, be competitive, maybe call out your colleagues if they say, you know, if you're sort of trying to go for the same position or whatever. And she was determined with her own company not to follow that same routine, but in the end found that actually with her own employees, she'd fallen into a lot of those same patterns. So she was actually putting herself and her employees under the same kind of pressure that she'd been put under. And that was something that I also experienced. So it went beyond this kind of funding experience to both of us thinking like, actually, there's so much about the way that we're running our businesses that just doesn't seem right. It's what everybody's telling us to do. It's what we're reading about in all the books, and everybody else seems to be doing it and getting on fine, but it's just not how we want to run a business. So when sort of like looking at, you know, business advice and looking for books and this kind of thing, we realized that of the top 50 Amazon bestsellers in business and management, only 5 of them were written by women. So there was a bit of a discrepancy there. And actually the ones that were written by women tended to be kind of like trying to fix women, to put it bluntly. So trying to be like, okay, you're not getting on well with the system. This is what you need to do to kind of adapt and fit in. And so none of what we were reading and hearing was really, you know, what we wanted to be hearing and listening. And we asked ourselves, what if it's not the women that are the problem, but rather the system? You know, what if it's not the women that need fixing, but the system? And I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but it still kind of blows my mind sometimes, these statistics, that if you think about the system that we're all trying to adapt to and like work well in and fit in with, it's just not working at all. And of course we all know that even more now with Corona, but you know, you've got massive amounts of burnout, people massively disillusioned with their employers and their companies, not trusting their bosses, not trusting their colleagues. We've got massive inequality, which is just growing and growing and growing and growing. And we've also obviously got huge issues with climate change. So that kind of, you know, all of that leads us to think that maybe it's not the women that are the problem, but the system in itself. So we were like, okay, if that's the situation, let's look for some women who are working outside of the system, who are not going with the status quo, who've said like, no, we've read the books and we think they're crap. We're just going to do it our own way. and see what they've got to add to the discourse, and found that there's actually a lot of women out there like that who aren't getting a platform and that not many people know about. So Stephanie Shirley is one of these women. If there's only one takeaway from this presentation or from this book, then it is to absolutely Google Stephanie Shirley and try and like find out as much as you can about her, because she's our absolute idol. She founded a tech company in the 1960s. She was a programmer herself, but had to leave the workforce because she got married. She realized that there was lots of other women that had to do that as well. So she was like, okay, if I can't go to work, then I will start my own business from home, and I will only employ other women who are also having to work at home. So again, back in the 1960s, this is what she did. They were writing code and sending it to each other via, post, and just communicating via telephone. She built this company up to be worth around 400 million pounds at its biggest valuation. Everybody continued to work from home all the time. So it was a completely remote company, again, like back in the 1960s, when that wasn't like a trendy thing or a necessary thing through Corona. And beyond that, she actually gave away her shares to her employees. So she basically allowed them to not only profit from the company. So several of her employees, I think 70 of employees, became millionaires in the process of the growth of the company. But she also enabled them to be majority decision makers on the board, which, back then was also just absolutely revolutionary. And this was a woman who had to sign her name as Steve, because otherwise she wouldn't be taken seriously. We also spoke to Vivian Ming, who's based in San Francisco, and her philosophy of building companies, and she's built many of them, and also she's done a dual PhD in neuroscience, and has been offered jobs at the C-level at most of the big startups like Amazon and Uber, and just said, like, no way, like they just don't match with my values. I don't believe that that's the right way to build companies, and I'm going to show that there's a better way to do it. And just what we learned about her, about putting the people, the employees, at the very center of your business, really living that idea of being completely human at work, but not separating this, this idea of work life and home life, and things like this, which she said to us at the beginning of every project that she does with her staff. They ask themselves this question: when this project is done, will everybody working on it be a better person, or will we simply get the project done? And that's a pretty powerful philosophy to approach your work. We also spoke to Anna Jona, who's a German entrepreneur who neither of us knew before. She's built a company up, also bootstrapped and with just loans and public support, like public loans, so to the EU, and some private loans, but she refused to go the VC way because she wanted to keep control. She now has over 100 employees who, again, like Stephanie, all work remotely. So she had children when she started the company, and she was like, I can't do this and go to an office. So I'm not going to make my employees do that either. So she's built up this very large company without VC investment, completely remotely, and it's pretty much under the radar in Germany. And Jennifer Brandel. So we were lucky enough to speak to one of the Zebras Unite founders, who talked about her own, because all the Zebras Unite founders are also obviously founders of their own companies, and talked about how when she was founding her company, she actually went to the company builder that she was applying to, and rather than like we did, going with the flow and just sort of lying and pretending that you were trying to build a VC style company, she was like, actually, I need you to know right now I'm not in this to build a giant company, and that might be counter to my mission, and I'm not going to let you influence me to do that in any other way. And so we talked to all of these women, got a whole load of learnings about their real kind of like day-to-day, so not just the kind of like top level stuff, but really how they do things like recruiting, how they do things like looking for investors, how they manage themselves and their teams, and pulled it together into a kind of hands-on business book. And these are some of the learnings that we had. So if you've not read the book yet, that's your sort of spoiler alert that comes at the end. And these are just maybe 3 of the things to draw on that we really like have adopted quite seriously. So this idea of professional distance, which is so deeply embedded in the culture of work, you know, that you need to have a certain distance from your employees in order to be able to function. And we've kind of found this to be, you know, completely like a complete misnomer, and that actually you need a, you know, professional like a professional closeness, and you know, this idea of being somebody else at work, and, you know, having to leave your home self and your emotions and your feelings at home doesn't make for a better manager. It doesn't make for a better team or a more productive team, and it certainly doesn't make for a happier team, and more balanced and healthy. So that's one of the things that we kind of talk about. Another thing which some of the women, or a lot of the women, talked about was that they see their main role as founders as helping their individual team members to surface their individual purpose. So they basically, and this was one of the things that Vivian said, and as I said, she's a neuroscientist, so she also kind of understands some of the science behind it, but for her, you know, real productivity and real success and real innovation comes from making sure that everybody is so connected to their work, that it, you know, it's so closely related to what they want to do in life. And if you can't enable that for your employees, then you should help them to find a different job. So it's like not something that she just doesn't compromise on. That's her core and key kind of success measurement when it comes to her team. And related to that is this idea of rewarding the connectors and the culture builders. So a lot of us are used to a kind of culture at work where the loud ones and the sort of confident ones and the ones who are like doing projects and, you know, being very visible are the ones that tend to get promoted and tend to get rewarded and recognized. And actually there's lots of studies to suggest, and again, this is something that Vivian pointed out, that the most productive teams are the ones with more of these people, the connectors and the culture builders, the ones who are prepared to step back and not put themselves in the limelight, the ones that remember everybody's birthdays and, you know, are kind of like looking out for relationships and managing all of those like between things that are happening in a team. And the fewer of those people you have, the less productive your team will be. So if you've got a team of, you know, all those people who are just like go-getters and not looking left and right, but just like looking forward, and you'd think that might be the most productive team, that's actually also something that's not true. Sorry, I'm at my parents and they've got a landline which I can't answer. And another like just final big point, because this is obviously related to the zebras thing, make sure to challenge the paradigm of growth. So this is something that we talk a lot about and that we really struggle with, to kind of get out of this idea that you can only be successful if you are a big company making lots of money. And it's really difficult to break down because everybody else sort of measures you feel like everybody else is measuring you on that way, you know, like when you go to startup conferences, everybody is asking you like, you know, how, or, you know, what level of funding are you on, and how many team members have you got, and that's the sort of how you like set the hierarchies in the startup sector. But we talk a lot about how actually, you know, growth for growth's sake is easy, and it's boring and not what we need for, you know, the future of our world. So here's an example of some female politicians that are putting that into practice on a national level as well. And really, what we sort of came to is this idea that you have to question everything. So all of these things that we're told about how to do business and how to be successful and how to be a founder and how to be an entrepreneur is based on a very narrow perspective defined by a very narrow section of the population. What we really need to do is to sort of build our inner competence and our self-management and our inner strength and self-awareness in order to know what's right for us and to question everything that we're told. And we believe that, yeah, in doing so, we can create different companies and a different economy. So that's the introduction.
Thank you, Naomi. That was great. So here you have, I think, Instagram and a really cool website. I think the German edition is coming in summer. Is that right?
Yeah, it's being published by Ulstein at the end of August. Yeah. So for those who don't like reading in English, that's
right. So I don't know if you mentioned at the beginning, but if you don't know who Naomi is, she is the founder also of the biggest, the most successful platform for job seekers who want to find a job with purpose, called TBD. I'm a big fan. I subscribe to the newsletter. I recommend it to you if you haven't yet. And Lisa founded Folkdays, which is a fair fashion brand, right? And when reading the book, I found it especially interesting because you said in the beginning there was a personal story that actually you founded these companies and everything was going well. You thought it was going for a while, but then at some point kind of realized that things felt wrong and you kind of maybe not hit the rock bottom, but you didn't feel like you were the leaders that you wanted to be. So that was one of the motivations to actually start doing this research and get advice from real role models. So the question would be now, since you did this research, what changed in your company?
So quite a lot. So although we were impact driven always, and we had a clear sort of mission and purpose, as I said, we weren't necessarily working differently. So we knew that what we were doing was different, but not how we were doing it wasn't very different. And so that's what we've been working on in the last year. So we've actually gone completely remote. We've also become self-organized. So I am no longer the boss, and neither is my co-founder. And we're sort of on a level hierarchy with our employees, which has been a kind of crazily challenging process, and it's taken a year, I'd say, to get to somewhere where we can would call ourselves self-organized, and we're probably still not completely there yet, but it's incredibly rewarding because it's been about a lot of that thing that I talked about earlier, of really focusing on everybody's individual purpose and figuring out what that is and how we can how we can each support each other to focus on that and to develop that in order to reach our sort of company purpose. So yeah, we've gone remote, we've gone self-organized, and just that, the kind of general idea of trying to challenge everything, I guess. We still definitely struggle with a lot of things. So last week, Lisa and I had a conversation about how she was approaching somebody who was interested in partnering up. It's a bigger company, and they would be a kind of investor in her company, and they wanted to see her figures, and she was a little bit nervous about it because she was suddenly back into this mindset of oh God, is my company big enough? Do I have big enough revenues? What are they going to think about it? Because that's basically, the only way you feel at the moment there is to measure any kind of success. And she sort of put herself under a lot of pressure and really kind of felt herself sort of slipping back into that idea of oh God, I'm not good enough. I'm not, my company isn't successful. And that's something that we really have to still, like, both of us have to consciously work through. Like, we're working to different parameters than most people. So we talk a little bit about systempreneurship in the book, for example, where the systempreneurs aren't necessarily interested in, having a big company, because they realize that even a big company can't change systems. In order to change systems, you need collaboration from lots of different actors and lots of different stakeholders. So a systempreneur will focus on their own company, but also focus on building connections with lots of other companies and lots of other stakeholders, and that won't kind of put a massive focus on, their company doesn't have to be the big one. What needs to happen is that everybody needs to work together to make the big change that you're trying to achieve. So when you look at it from that perspective, and you see, how much effort goes into that and how much, impact comes out of that, then, you can see what a huge success it is. But if you're just focusing on revenues or profit, which a lot of people still are, and in our minds also, so we're socialized also still to think that way, that sort of makes you doubt yourself still.
Thank you. I would open up now for questions from you. Just raise your hand with the emoji or unmute and ask. Anything comes to mind. Maybe that was pretty comprehensive. Annika is asking in chat, what's the future of TBD and to belonging?
Yeah, good question. So with the future of TBD is to continue to support people to find their purpose. And I think we started off kind of providing a lot of content and jobs, and realized sort of over time through also our own experiences that there's a lot more to living a purposeful career than just having a purposeful job, which is why we've now started the Purpose Fellowship, which is a kind of like a coaching and community program to connect people who are looking for their purpose and to help them to coach themselves and each other. And To Belonging is a really important project for us. So I guess one of the other changes that we made is to really, like I said, to focus on our individual purpose and our company purpose and connect the two. And we realized that what we were doing was focusing a lot on the privileged people. So actually people like us, to be honest. So our team was completely white and middle class and university educated, and we were mainly reaching those kind of people with what we were putting out there. And when we looked around ourselves at the impact sector as well, we realized that actually that's what the impact sector looks like in general. So about a year ago, we started to work on this idea of deconstructing all of these like hidden power structures within the sector that kind of keep it that way. From patriarchalism to neocolonialism, and trying to figure out what it is that's keeping the impact sector so privileged. And yeah, so To Belonging is the kind of like beginning of our outward facing work of that. So we've done a lot of internal work. We've changed we've recruited some backgrounds, which has completely opened up our perspectives on all of our blind spots and what we were missing out on. And that's kind of the effect that we want to have for the whole sector as well. So we're trying to kind of provide resources and information and a community for deconstructing that privilege in the social impact and sustainable sector.
Thank you. We have two questions. First, Clemens raised his hand, so I'm going to give him first the stage to ask a question, and then we ask a question, Ola and Julia.
Yeah, thank you. Naomi, I was very impressed from what you told us, and thought it's really wonderful how you did this journey that you described, and it touched me a lot. And the question is, can you talk a little bit more about how you did it and what you actually did to come from the space where you started, or the place where you started, to where you are now, and how you involved the team, how you went through this whole process. That's what I would be quite curious about. And it sounds like you put in a lot of psychological safety, actually, which is wonderful.
I put in a lot of psychological work. Yeah, I did.
I suppose so, yeah.
It's been a lot of self-reflection, to be honest. Like, I don't think there's like maybe there is, but I haven't found it like an easy way around this process. You've really got to go through it, and it's a lot of kind of like, you know, just using coaches and therapists as well. And this was something that was common amongst the women that we spoke to, that a lot of them had used coaches and therapists, and even provide them for their teams as well, to really like go down into your like socialization and all the things that you've learned about how we are supposed to work, and how we are supposed to run a business, and how we are supposed to communicate with people, and figuring out, you know, why you're super triggered by certain things, you know, the role of your own ego in certain reactions to things. Yeah, just doing a lot of that kind of like inner work. And one of the women that we also spoke to is Joanna Breidenbach, who's you know, a leading thought leader on this whole issue of inner work, and how necessary that is to this transformation process. So we did a lot of that. And then we just sort of like the physical, like what happened in the company was that we had a kind of moment where a couple of people left, and that was also related to the fact that our culture was not very good, and we were just like, okay, let's take this opportunity, let's take a break. We did an offsite, and just went away for a couple of days, and really just like took down the daily business quite a lot, like not completely, because we have a kind of like regular daily business, but we reduced it quite a lot, and we just said, look, we're gonna really take our time with this. We're going to invest a little bit in kind of coaches. It wasn't, you know, thousands and thousands of euros, but, you know, more than we'd been prepared to in the past, in coaches and consultants, and just did a lot of that work then together, figuring out kind of like what had gone wrong, and how we need to change ourselves, and the way in which we communicate with each other, and yeah, so that, and then that's just been a sort of like ongoing process. We have a coaching session every couple of weeks as a team. We have like global team days every 2 months, where we really just focus on our team organization and communication and structure, and don't talk about like, you know, what articles or jobs we're putting online. And we've really just committed to it.
Thank you.
Would you be up for a podcast interview on that?
Sure.
It's just wonderful how you describe it. Right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Ola is asking, can you talk more about your business entity and how you decided to allocate equity? Or if you have considered any changes and whether there is legal vehicles for that?
Yeah, so we started the GmbH, like a for-profit entity, and that's what we are still. And with our investors, they hold about 5% of the equity, and they're impact investors. So it's not, you know, we don't have the same relationship with them as some or lots of startups do, that they're not putting us under massive financial pressure. But nonetheless, we don't necessarily feel like that aligns with our values. Or it didn't in the first place. We didn't really think we had any other options. And so one of the things that we're looking at right now is the purpose Stiftung, the purpose model for building a business. So we may try and transition to that. But obviously we have to convince our investors to go with that, because that would mean that they would lose their ability to make decisions, or influence decisions, I should say. And in retrospect, I would obviously, if there'd been that sort of thing back then, I would have gone with that. I also am super interested in the cooperative model, which the Zebras are pushing a lot. I think that would also have been a great model for us, or could be for the future. But yeah, the GmbH is not very well suited to our kind of business.
Right. Ecosia, I think, as far as I know, they transitioned into the purpose, into the steward ownership, and they investors agreed actually for this change. So fingers crossed for you as well. And I know the Purpose Stiftung is also pushing for actual legal
entity.
GmbH, right? Like
yeah.
So that would be a legal framework. Okay, Julie is asking, have you experienced convincing people from conventional investment and business to adapt your approach, even if this includes focusing less on profits? Or is it more like two parallel startup and business worlds next to each other?
I mean, I haven't sort of been in a situation that I've had to like convince somebody in a sort of like business sense to invest in us. I mean, I guess the whole like impact investing process, the impact investors kind of took into account that they wouldn't be getting like a massive hockey stick situation. But they were sort of, you know, primed to that because that was the impact investing thing. But I think in terms of sort of like talking to, you know, friends and colleagues that are more in the traditional startup sector, I do think a lot of them are just like, this sounds like completely insane. Like, why? Like, it's just not even doing business properly. Like, why would you, you know, the goal of a business is to make it as big as possible. Like, that's just, and as fast as possible. Like, it's very difficult, I think, to kind of bridge that gap in terms of understanding. So that's sort of been my experience. But I think, you know, obviously absolutely necessary. And I think, and I hope Kasia and I and lots of us are going to work together to kind of bridge that gap, because I think that's sort of what needs to happen next, and to really get mainstream investors investing in this way. You know, I think I'd love to like have a fund or many funds in Germany which are just, you know, targeting this kind of company, because at the moment there isn't really much. I mean, we had Julia a couple of months ago who's just started a revenue-based investing fund, but that's pretty much the only one in Germany.
That's right. There is also Uplift One. Ari, who I think is in here, I added the link to the Zebra.Berlin website. If you want to check it out, it's another revenue-based investing opportunity. But yeah, we need definitely much more. Maciej, who is also an angel investor, we had a great conversation with his company Ragnarsson, is asking, before you made the decision to become a remote self-managed company, what held you back, or what was especially difficult to do this transition?
Good question. So I think we actually did think about it. You know, we played with the idea quite early on of both of those things. I think the remote thing was just the classic like trust issue that a lot of founders and managers have, and hopefully not anymore, having experienced that it, you know, it's completely misfounded. But you know, we were, and I think this is particularly me, I don't want to speak for my other founders, but I was quite traditional in my ideas of what you know, what it takes to build a business, and you've got to be, you know, there, and you've got to be there like 12 hours a day, and you know, if you've not got bums on seats, then nothing's happening. So I think that was a limitation in, and the self-organized thing was kind of this idea, like we thought it would probably be kind of cool, but it would probably be a massive load of effort and probably cost a lot. And, you know, we, especially at the beginning of our startup, you don't have many resources, and you're sort of very focused on just like getting ahead and like surviving. So we felt like we just didn't have the resources to invest in it. And I would say that that is true, that there is a lot of, you know, it does take time, and it does take resources, and you do need a coach, like you can't do it on your own. But it's like the best investment that I think that we could have made. And even if you don't go to full self-organization, just the work that you do with your team on, you know, understanding themselves and understanding yourself, and why things happen in a certain way, and improving communication, all of that stuff that you never bother with at the beginning of a startup because you're like, I've got other things to do, is really something that maybe investors or angel investors like yourself could encourage, because I think it's probably the best investment at an early stage.
Thank you.
There is time for one more question. I maybe would love to add one more. Or is anyone in the chat?
I don't see anyone.
All right, then maybe just one more question from my perspective. And Naomi, thanks so much for the great presentation. Very inspiring. Also, thanks for me. I was also exploring a bit your website a few days ago, and then I just realized, in a way, like more than 2,000, right? Like that do actually search for impact-driven employees, and I was very curious, especially because I'm working with a lot of like traditional Mittelstand companies, and then I was curious whether you have some very traditional companies who are actually very old-fashioned sometimes in a way they treat employees, and you often would be surprised how hierarchical they can be, even though they have such a great ethics and culture in business. They still might be extremely hierarchical and not very diverse in a way they actually think, treat people, etc. So I was curious whether you see some of these companies also coming to you and asking for advice and help.
So actually it's mostly so our focus is sort of on that external impact, I guess. So most of the companies that we help to find employees are more of the traditional, like hierarchical companies or organizations, especially if you like look at the NGO sector. They're hugely conservative and kind of stuck in their ways, and that's something that we've sort of been like challenging ourselves on a lot, in terms of where's what is a good place to work, and is having an external impact enough if actually that comes at the cost of the mental health of your employees. And burnout is a huge problem in the social impact and sustainability sector, which is why we're really trying to externalize our own journey, and communicate that to our customers and our users and our community, to kind of start to hopefully spread some seeds of, okay, there is a different way of working, and you can, with kind of limited resources, do this transformation process, in the hope that other organizations will do so, because I think it's fundamental to real sustainable, real transformation can't happen with the same structures that caused all of this situation that we're in right now. So there's got to be some courageous NGOs and organizations that say, okay, no, we don't want to be that kind of white male led hierarchical organization that most of them are. We're gonna kind of not just get somebody in to do diversity or whatever. We're going to completely transform the way that we work together, and that's the seeds that we're the little revolution that we're trying to kind of get started as well.
Thank you. We have Theo raising her hand. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask the question in person because it's a bit complex to explain. I'm the founder, one of the founders of Equalista, and we are a social tech startup for a gender equality learning app. And we have managed a few things really well. We managed to keep all equity, and we're managing the launch without external financing. So there we were successful. But I would actually say that the whole idea of starting a startup as a self-organized company nearly made us lose everything. And we were lucky enough to have Bettina Rollo as one of the coaches in the process, but she had actually really retrained us to not see hierarchy in a in a damaging way from the start, but that it can be a tool to give a team safety and actually make them operational. Because in the end, we basically ended up not being a company, but kind of providing coaching and therapy to our employees instead of building a product. And I think that's a risk that actually a lot of entrepreneurs that are passionate about the topic have, that you kind of go into the other extreme instead of building something sustainable. Yeah, that was just, I want to ask about your experience with that.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. And gosh, yeah, I mean, we could like talk for hours about self-organization and the goods and the bads and the evils, but yeah, I guess it's so the whole book isn't about self-organization. That's just one of the models that's presented, and the one that we decided to go for ourselves, to just kind of like do the most extreme, but it's certainly not for every company. And I think Bettina, we had her talk recently, and she actually like specifically said probably best not to start as a self-organized company, but to do it, you know, when you've got a little bit of a sort of structure in place. But you know, we're 6 years down the line, and I think we could have done it a bit earlier than we did. But yeah, I think the important thing about self-organization that a lot of people kind of like misunderstand, and you just drew on there, is that it's not non-hierarchical. It's like competence-based hierarchy and temporary hierarchies. So it's not that you never have anybody kind of taking decisions and telling people what to do, but it's just not in the same structure as we're used to, where basically if you've been in the company the longest and you founded it, you're the one who gets to make the decisions, and everybody else has to go along with it. And there's a kind of like, you know, decreasing hierarchy along those terms. Yeah, it's a very, very good point. It's a massive danger. I think we do spend a lot of time coaching, and sometimes it feels overwhelming and like, you know, but yeah, generally speaking, we feel like it's really improved our external facing work as well. We get so much more positive feedback now than we used to. So yeah, hopefully it will continue that way.
All right, we are at time, and actually the plan was to do little breakout groups where you can get to know each other, smaller groups, and discuss. So I was wondering now if people would like to stay like 15 more minutes and do that, or you feel like, oh, we're okay now and we need to go. Who would like to stay? Maybe you raise your hand.
Just the people who want to stay can stay, and everybody else can go, and then we don't have to. Right,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. You don't need to like pick. That's a good experience leader technique. So whoever would like to stay and a little like exercise and discussion in a breakout group and get to know each other in a smaller group, stay, and whoever needs to go. It was amazing having you here. I think it was a really interesting discussion, and you hear from us because Naomi and I have plans to also offer alternatives, I'd say, in Germany. So connect via zebras.berlin, TBD. You can join our Telegram group, and we see each other. All right, we have 13 people. Oh, the discussion was so good. It's so interesting, Naomi, that
I'm not surprised that people are going. I'm also like melting here.
The questions are I think that's we're 9 now, 8. I think we just keep it maybe for the next time in that case. Yeah. But yeah, the questions were great, and thank you so much, Naomi, for taking time and melting with us. Super inspirational. Yeah, everybody loves your book, and see you next time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. And Kasia, thank you for hosting it.
Of course. My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Clemens, you wrote me a message, right?
Yeah, I would be interested, actually. I would have to talk to the people I'm working with. but you were so authentic, and the way you described your journey is just great.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
you show your own vulnerability. You show your whole person.